Bleach, the secret god who humbled Yhwach. Please like, share, and subscribe. Episode 1. A strange uncle fell from the sky. Soul Society, North Rakongai District 80. A young man with a shabby dress and a little dirty body was hiding in a dark alley with a nervous expression on his face. At this time, he was secretly observing a weapon fight that had occurred for unknown reasons. When the weapon fight was about to come to an end, a fallen soul caught the boy's attention. Hidden in the alley, he stared straight at the dark rice balls that fell from his body. The battle between you and me continued, and the young man still stared at the rice balls intently. While conjuring tricks, he had to take out a dagger and hold it tightly in his right hand. Maybe the boy himself hadn't noticed it, maybe because he was too nervous, his hand holding the dagger was trembling slightly. Just when this weapon fight entered the white-hot stage, the teenager directly held the dagger with his backhand and rushed to the battle group of the weapon fight at the fastest speed. His target was not the souls who participated in the weapon fight, but the dark rice balls on the ground. With an unusually thin body, he seemed to have exhausted all his strength and rushed towards his goal desperately. Before no one noticed, he quickly picked up the dark rice ball and stuffed it into his trouser pocket, and ran towards the south of this Rakongai. He took out a rice ball with his left hand and slammed it into the eye, while madly fleeing this place of right and wrong. Just when he naively thought that he had succeeded, a noisy scream came from behind him. "That brat again! Quick! Catch him! Don't let him run away! Brothers, he took our food! Kill him!" Dozens of brawny men armed with weapons swiftly chased in the direction of the young man's escape, dust and smoke everywhere. The souls who lived here, although they were already quite familiar with this scene, they quickly avoided the chasing people. Seeing that he was about to be overtaken, the young man went crazy and stuffed the remaining 2 rice balls into his eyes. While chewing bitterly the food in his mouth, he held the dagger in his hand tighter. After a period of strenuous pursuit, the young man was finally forced to a forest in the south by the chasing soldiers behind him. At this time, he is undoubtedly in desperation. In front of him was a fierce chaser, and behind him was a big river with turbulent water. The irresistible boy looked at the people in front of him with fierce eyes, and swallowed the last bite of the rice ball that he had chewed in his mouth. By the way, read more at mtlarchive.com. "Smelly boy. See where you are going this time." "Humph," said a brawny man who was obviously the boss. The young man didn't speak, he just looked at everyone in front of him coldly, and quickly calculated in his heart. "It's been 2 years since I've traveled into this world, and I am afraid that it will be more unfortunate today." Yu Taifeng is a traverser. He was a street rider who accidentally crossed into Shinigami's world. Different from other people's time when he traveled, he has been living hard and tenacious all the time after he traveled here for 2 years. When he just crossed here, he unexpectedly found himself feeling hungry. This is good news for him, because it proves that his spiritual power level is higher than the ordinary Liushuan here, and he can practice. However, this is undoubtedly bad news for him. Because he was just a teenager now, although he wasn't able to say that he was powerless, but compared with those who have lived here for a long time, he was indeed a lot weaker. At first, Yu Taifeng also tried to make some friends. However, living in the Zaraki district with the worst security conditions in the Soul Society for 2 years, really made him understand what the weak and the strong eat. The souls living here are like beasts in the jungle. They often fight for a bite, and sometimes even meet with swordsmen. Being friends with beasts, Yu Taifeng doesn't have that kind of leisure. Because it has been so long since the journey, it is most important for him to survive by any means. Unable to retreat, Yu Taifeng looked at the fierce crowd in front of him, with a cruel smile on his face, and immediately prepared to jump into the rushing river behind him. "This kid is crazy. Gosh. This lunatic." Just as everyone was amazed by Yu Taifeng's crazy behavior, the sudden change occurred. A dazzling fire blasted straight down from the sky and hit everyone on the ground. "Fuck." Yu Taifeng, who was ready to go to justice, couldn't help exclaiming after seeing the scene. Between the sparks and the fire, the flame smashed into the position of many chasing soldiers impartially. Rumble. Under a strong shock wave, screams echoed one after another, echoing in the sky above this area. At this moment, Yu Taifeng hurriedly hugged a big tree next to him to prevent himself from being drawn into the river behind him by the air current driven by the shock wave. After a few minutes, he patted the dust on his body, looking at the angry chasers not far away, and his nervous mood slowly eased. Although the crisis has been resolved, Yu Taifeng, who has been on the line of life and death all year round, did not leave in a hurry. He took advantage of the trend and hid behind the big tree he had just hugged, and began to observe. "Huh? How do you feel that something strange has been mixed into the chasing soldiers?" But it's no wonder he was surprised, because there was a strange figure in the chasing soldiers. After a period of observation, after ensuring that there was no danger, Yu Taifeng hurried to the messy place. He was even more curious about who this strange figure was than the chasers who had been culled. The strange man in front of him, who is about 2 meters tall and has a mustache, is undoubtedly the perpetrator of the tragedy just now. The gorgeous robe on his body was unexpectedly clean, obviously not a common product. A strange uncle fell from the sky? But why does it feel a bit familiar? Yu Taifeng looked at the strange man curiously, and said to himself. He scratched his head in confusion, as if trying to remember something. Finally, he seemed to have thought of some key clue. He couldn't help but stepped back 2 steps nervously, and looked at the middle-aged man on the ground with incredible eyes. This is... Yu Taifeng stammered. Episode 2. Unexpected anti-kill, activate the system. Yu Taifeng looked at the middle-aged man on the ground, feeling shocked at this moment. Long black hair, full of the iconic mustache, thin and slender figure with that gorgeous robe, the recognition is not too high. It turned out to be Yhwach. Yu Taifeng, who has traveled to the Shinigami world for more than 2 years, has always wanted to figure out when he is in the timeline. However, after many inquiries, he has not heard a few names he knows well. This also made him wonder if he had crossed the wrong place. Because in the current Soul Society, there is not only no spiritual arts academy, but even the Gotii 13th division has not been established. Just as Yu Taifeng was thinking about it, a suffocating Ryatsu burst out of Yhwach's body. What's the situation? Yu Taifeng, who is still a weak chicken, was directly crushed on the ground because of this violent Ryatsu. He was a little desperate to find that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move a bit. Just as he was trying to get out of trouble, the violent Ryatsu that was pressing on him suddenly disappeared. At this time, a majestic voice came to Yu Taifeng's ears. An ant-like flowing soul. Come to this king. After this series of changes, Yu Taifeng already guessed something. Why did Yhwach fall from the sky? It may not be clear to others, but for Yu Taifeng, who is an anime fan, it is simply too simple. Because in the Shinigami anime, Yhwach was defeated only twice. Once 1,000 years before the beginning of the plot, Yhwach played against Yamamoto Genryūsai, was severely injured and entered a state of suspended animation. The second time, he was finally beheaded by Kurosaki Ichigo in the anime's Millennium Blood War. After careful observation and thinking, Yu Taifeng was very sure that the current Yhwach must be seriously injured. I am afraid there is only one person who can make the famous Quincy King Yhwach seriously injured. That is Yamamoto Genryūsai, the captain of the Gotii 13th division, who is known as the strongest Shinigami. The timeline question that has always puzzled Yu Taifeng finally has an answer. It seems that I have traveled 1,000 years before the beginning of the Shinigami world plot. I've lived here for so long in a muddle-headed manner, it's fine if the golden finger hasn't been activated, and now I even ran into Yhwach. Yu Taifeng had to sigh in his heart that his luck is really bad. Because he knows very well. Even Yhwach in a severely injured state can shake himself to death with Ryatsu alone. Including the violent Ryatsu who just appeared, it must have been deliberately done by the other party. Yu Taifeng is already in a dilemma now, neither running nor not running. Didn't you hear what the king said? Yhwach's voice appeared in Yu Taifeng's ears again. Although he didn't know what kind of medicine was sold in Yhwach gourd. But I decided to give in falsely first, and then wait and see the changes. At this moment, a sudden scream came from Yhwach's mouth. Under a burst of hot orange flames, the gorgeous robe on his body was burned out, and countless red cracks appeared all over his body. Flames spewed out from the red cracks one after another, and Yhwach at this moment had already turned into a human-shaped flame. Read more at mtlarchive.com. The extremely hot flames were still burning, and Yhwach also released more Ryatsu to suppress the flames burning on his body. He tried to control Ryatsu's strength, so as to reduce the pain on his body. He shouted hoarsely, "This damn seal. Ah. Yamamoto, old thief. I want you to die." Although Yu Taifeng was nervous now, he still tried to calm himself down. He looked at Yhwach, who was already immature, ready to escape from this place of right and wrong at any time. Because now, being alive is the most important thing to him. Just as Yu Taifeng was thinking about how to get away, a burst of stronger Ryatsu suddenly fell on him. He was overturned to the ground again. Yu Taifeng's whole person is suffering to the extreme now, but he knows very well in his heart that if this continues, he will definitely be shaken to death by this violent Ryatsu. After a careful observation, he discovered an extremely important problem. That is, the violent flame that just burned on Yhwach's body didn't even threaten him at all. Combined with what Yhwach just said, it looks like it should be the old Yamamoto, who has set some kind of powerful anti-injury seal on him. This kind of seal may be able to limit Yhwach to the greatest extent. According to the Shinigami manga, Yhwach was defeated by the old man Yamamoto. It took 900 years to recover my heartbeat, and another 90 years to regain consciousness, and finally it took another 9 years to regain my strength. Then, Yhwach, who has just experienced the torment of the seal, must be extremely weak now. As for why he fell from the sky, this is not what Yu Taifeng should consider. Because he felt that if he hesitated any more, he would be dead and ugly. Don't stop at all. Fight. Although Yu Taifeng still has no bottom in his heart, but the matter has ended, he can only put himself to death and live afterwards. At this moment, his eyes were full of firmness, and he began to walk slowly towards Yhwach's location. Step. 2 steps. 3 steps. A short distance of 3 or 4 meters gave Yu Taifeng a feeling of near collapse. Fortunately, he finally came to Yhwach's side with a dagger in his hand. At this time, Yhwach, who was seriously injured, finally managed to force Yamamoto Genryūsai into his body and temporarily suppressed the seal. Just as he was thinking about how to get away, he saw Yu Taifeng with cold eyes appearing in front of him. Yhwach couldn't help feeling nervous. Because he just used all his strength to suppress the seal, Ryatsu has run out of abilities, his current state can be described as extremely poor. He knew very well in his heart that his condition might not be any better than ordinary people who were seriously injured and dying. He never dreamed of the existence of ants in his own eyes. At this moment, he would look at him coldly with a terrifying look in his eyes. Just when Yhwach was about to say something, he only saw a cold dagger pierced into his heart. Puff. A mouthful of scarlet blood flowed from Yhwach's horns, and his eyes widened in shock with an unbelievable expression on his face. This ant-like existence dared to attack himself. You. Yhwach trembled unwillingly, feeling that his vitality was losing rapidly. Yu Taifeng was afraid that his friend would suddenly violent, so he hurriedly paid a few more dollars. Although, the dagger in his hand encountered resistance for a while. However, after pouring all the Ryatsu in his body onto the dagger, he still managed to add dozens of new wounds to Yhwach. After a few seconds, Yhwach's whole life was gone, and it was completely cold. Yu Taifeng would never have imagined that the first meeting between himself and the final boss of the Shinigami world would end in this way. But fortunately, he also escaped. If I had the slightest hesitation just now, I might have been killed by the recovered Yhwach. After observing the surrounding environment with vigilant eyes, Yu Taifeng prepared to get up and leave this place of right and wrong. At this moment, a vain mechanical sound appeared in his mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the first kill and activating the strongest box picking system. Yu Taifeng was stunned because his long-awaited golden finger finally appeared. With the disappearance of the system prompt, his attention was also attracted by the dozens of large and small boxes scattered around his feet. Eating chicken game? Yu Taifeng whispered to himself while squatting down quickly to study. Ding! The falling boxes around the host are detected. Is the host all turned on? Happiness came too suddenly. Yu Taifeng suppressed his inner excitement and hurriedly responded to the system, turn on. As he gave the order to open the box, a faint light came into his eyes. Episode 3. Get rewards, start planning. Yu Taifeng stared closely, dozens of faint rays of light appeared one after another. He can't wait to know what spoils he will draw this time. Ding! Congratulations to the host for acquiring the dilapidated My X5, Rusty Iron Rod X3, Ryatsu X15, Quincy Bloodline, and Special Skill X1. As soon as the system prompt sounded, Yu Taifeng only felt a faint warm current flow into his body. Special skills? Let's see what it is. At this moment, a virtual screen appeared directly in front of his eyes. The strongest box picking system. Host, Yu Taifeng. Age, 16. Lineage, Human Soul, Quincy. Ryatsu, 95. Special skills, Omniscience and Omnipotence. Kendo, none. White hits, none. Shuanpa, none. Keto, none. After Yu Taifeng checked his personal character panel, there was a wave of waves in his heart. Because he actually gained Yhwach's omniscience and omnipotence. He had a simple understanding of the skill of smashing the sky while watching Shinigami anime. He never thought that he actually possessed this ability. But now, Yu Taifeng is not the time to study these slowly. There has just been a huge movement here, and it is estimated that Shinigami who will be patrolled will soon be attracted. Although he already possesses the omniscience and omnipotence ability, his current strength is still too weak, and he has to leave this place of right and wrong first. Yu Taifeng didn't have any muddles, and quickly left the area where the incident occurred just now, and returned to his usual residence with the fastest speed. 10 minutes later, a group of Shinigami in Death Tyrant costumes, led by a white-haired man, came to the incident area. If Yu Taifeng were still here, he would definitely recognize who the leader Shinigami was. It was the deputy of the old man Yamamoto, and later, Chojiro Sasuke, the deputy captain of the 1st Division of the 13th Gotei Division. Block the scene immediately. Report the information here to Captain Yamamoto. Chojiro looked at the dozen corpses in front of him, and while instructing loudly, he fixed his gaze on Yhwach's corpse. He muttered with a solemn expression, "It seems something is not simple, read more at mtlarchive.com. At the same time, in the shadow world of Soul Society Siriidii, buildings built with Lingzi began to collapse one after another. 25 figures in white clothes, after a brief gathering, scattered around and quickly disappeared. After Yu Taifeng ran for a while, panting and returning to his residence. After confirming the surrounding environment again and again, he opened the system panel again and began to check in detail the introduction of Omniscience and Omnipotence. After a period of detailed research, Yu Taifeng began to recall Yhwach's ability in the anime. He came to a conclusion based on the original book. Yhwach's omniscience and omnipotence can not only know the past and the future, but can also actively empower anyone with various abilities. When Yhwach needs strength, he can take the initiative to take back all the strength that empowers people. However, Yhwach's omniscience and omnipotence seem to be limited. For example, the power of illusions and dreams can affect Yhwach's omniscience to a certain extent. Of course, this is just Yu Taifeng's analysis, based on the plot of the comic. So far, he has discovered the most important point. That is, Yhwach will not use omniscience and omnipotence at all. This kind of ability is simply a violent thing for him. Because the strongest of omniscience and omnipotence is to break the boundaries of cognition. In short, it is development. Although Yhwach has mastered certain destructive powers, this power has reached the maximum threshold. It's like Max, the highest skill in an online game. As a traverser, Yu Taifeng's ability to recognize things is comparable to that of the characters in the comics. It's no wonder that Yhwach will be killed by himself as a traverser after being defeated by Yamamoto, old man. But so surely despising the other party is only because the current timeline is still 1,000 years ago when Shinigami's plot began. Yhwach, who is still in the groping stage, is not unjustly defeated. As for the events after the beginning of the plot, Yu Taifeng has full certainty to influence the direction of the plot. Because he still has 1,000 years to plan, and he is also familiar with all the things that will happen in the world of Shinigami. Therefore, he wants to become stronger as soon as possible before the old man Yamamoto sets up the Gotei 13th Division, so that he can make his first plan. Although there is still plenty of time, Yu Taifeng dare not slack in the slightest. After all, before acquiring the system, he had lived through that kind of lingering life. Yu Taifeng has secretly vowed in his heart that since he has obtained the box-picking system and the power of omnipotence, then, he must break the boundaries of this world and become the strongest. Now, he has to start preparing for his first step plan. As we all know, Rukongai outside Siriidii is divided into 320 areas from 1 to 80 in 4 directions, southeast, northwest and northwest. Among them, the lower the number of Rukongai, the worse the public security life and other conditions. Among all Rukongai, there is no shortage of strong wandering souls that can be cultivated. In the strong flowing soul, there are bound to be some murderers who do no evil. Their acting style is far from the word justice, and it has caused Yu Taifeng to suffer a lot. After acquiring the box-picking system and omniscience and omnipotence, he was ready to target these murderers and launch his first plan. From the weak to the strong step by step, killing and tempering are naturally inevitable. Facing the rising sun, Yu Taifeng stepped out of his residence. Now, he finally started his first plan. Add more rules, only the ones with Jill can see it. New book release for support. Collection 3000 plus 1 more. Flowers 2000 plus 1 more. Evaluate 1000 plus 1 more. Reward 5 people plus 1 more. The new book is not easy, so I beg your readers to support me. Stable updates every day, the shelves are bound to burst. Episode 4. Encountered the evil. Rukongai District 79, Saolu District. A teenager casually wiped the blood on the saber with a coarse cloth. Under the horrified eyes of many onlookers, he calmly pinned the saber to his waist, and then turned and left. He calmly walked towards the junction of Saolu District and Zaraki District, as if the dozens of murderers who had just been killed by himself had nothing to do with him. It's been more than a year, and I didn't expect to get a talent for kendo by accident today. Yu Taifeng walked calmly while muttering to himself. At this time, the system panel that appeared in front of him also gave him a certain understanding of his own strength improvement this time. The strongest box picking system. Host, Yu Taifeng. Age, 17. Lineage, Human Soul, Quincy. Ryatsu, 509. Special skills, Omniscience and Omnipotence. Kendo, Mastery. White hits, the basics. Shuanpa, none. Keto, none. There are fewer and fewer Ryatsu, and it seems that no matter how many murderers you kill, you can't get a bigger improvement in a short time. It's the Kendo talent obtained this time, you can think of a way to study it. Since Yu Taifeng obtained the system until now, he has been practicing hard. At the same time, he also personally killed hundreds of Rukongai villains. In this year's time, Yu Taifeng has never stopped fighting. From the beginning, he often suffered serious injuries, and now he can easily settle dozens of opponents with just a few moves. I am afraid that only he himself knows the hardship. But today is indeed a good day for Yu Taifeng. Because, already in a bottleneck, he unexpectedly picked up his Kendo talent from a box dropped by a murderer. Although, it is just the most common Kendo basis. However, for Yu Taifeng, who has Omniscience and Omnipotence, he can't wait. After returning to his residence, Yu Taifeng began to figure it out in his mind. Compared to the various Kendo schools in the Shinigami world, he just feels that there is no need to learn at all. In his opinion, those Kendo skills that are often called killing skills are nothing more than bells and whistles. Read more at mtlarchive.com. Because in the face of absolute power, any so-called skills are not worth mentioning. What he needs to do now is to figure out a way to raise his Kendo level to the realm of breaking 10,000 magic with one force. Although, this may take a long time. But Yu Taifeng believes that with the help of the system and all-knowing and all-powerful, it is only a matter of time before the swordsmanship of one move to defeat the enemy can be developed. After turning on All-Knowing Almighty, a variety of swordsmanship movements appeared in his mind, and those movements were played in a loop like a slide. Yu Taifeng understands and thinks time and time again, and quickly conducts various simulation experiments. Before he knew it, 3 days had passed, and in the end, he still didn't get a result that satisfies him. Blindly talking about soldiers on paper really almost means, it seems that we can only seek a breakthrough in actual combat. After Yu Taifeng made the decision, while putting away the system interface, he took the saber beside him and walked out of the residence, preparing for a new round of hunting. Second brother, this stinky kid killed your brother. A middle-aged man dressed in sackcloth, 5 big and 3 thick, pointed to Yu Taifeng and said loudly. Yu Taifeng, who had just walked out of his residence, obviously didn't expect to get into trouble so soon. With a smile on his face, he looked at the obviously unkind people not far away, without showing any panic. Smelly boy. So you killed my brother. Do you know who I am? The strong man in the lead glared at Yu Taifeng, holding the axe in his hand. I don't know, I'm not interested in knowing. The smile on Yu Taifeng's face gradually disappeared, and he responded faintly. Humph. You better wait to die. Our eldest sister is coming soon. The leading brawny seemed reckless, but he just kept provoking and didn't make any outrageous actions. Noisy. Yu Taifeng yelled, and directly drew out his sword and volleyed it out. Under Ryatsu's blessing, several invisible sword auras passed through everyone's bodies in an instant, turning them into corpses in an instant. The movement here just now has already attracted countless onlookers. They hadn't figured out the situation yet, only saw the young man drew his sword, and then this bloody and cruel scene appeared. Gosh. What's happening here? He is the devil. Yu Taifeng ignored the weak souls. After putting away his sword, he quickly walked towards the junction of Zaraki District and Saolu District. There is a gambling shop at the junction of these two areas. According to Yu Taifeng's memory, there will be several battles from time to time. His purpose is not to go to the casino to gamble, but to use the murderers around the casino to test his Kendo level. Although, he just used one move to kill dozens of provocateurs in seconds. However, this is much worse than what he expected in his heart. After all, the strength level of the weak chickens just now is just a little stronger than the ordinary Luhun. Yu Taifeng walked unhurriedly like this, and all the souls who knew him wherever they went, all consciously stepped aside. For fear of touching his brows, causing an unsuspecting disaster. Yu Taifeng felt helpless in response to the reactions of many passers-by. Although he had personally beheaded hundreds of murderers during the year he had obtained the system. However, he knew very well in his own heart that all those who died in his hands were horrendous people. When Yu Taifeng was about to reach his destination, a burst of murderous Ryatsu came from behind him. He subconsciously pulled out the saber around his waist and quickly turned around to block the attack from behind. At this time, a face that made him feel a little familiar appeared before his eyes. A young woman wearing white linen and long black hair was looking at him with a fanatical look in her swords in both hands. Yu Taifeng looked at the young woman who launched a surprise attack on him, with doubts in his eyes. Although she only wore the cheapest linen, her tall and elegant figure set off in white linen, which made people feel enviable. However, the saber clasped in the woman's hand and her seemingly weak appearance formed a distinct response at this moment. It is like a white tulip with barbs growing on the branches and leaves. Although you killed that bunch of trash, you have to admit that you are really strong. The woman muttered to Yu Taifeng while looking at him with more fanatical eyes. At this moment, Yu Taifeng had a faint feeling. That is, he now seems to be the prey in the eyes of hunters. After a brief surprise, Yu Taifeng couldn't help but chuckle and said to the woman, unexpectedly, I would meet you. Do you even know me? After hearing Yu Taifeng's words, the woman asked unexpectedly. In so many districts of Rukongai, the most reputed evil person Ms. Yhwach, how could I not know you? Yu Taifeng's face was as calm as water, and he replied faintly. Episode 5. Yu Taifeng vs. Ma Yhwach. After hearing Yu Taifeng's words, Wu Yhwach was slightly shocked. Although she knew very well in her heart, what she had done had already been ridiculous. However, the young man not far away not only completely ignored his fierce name, but was also able to react immediately and resist his own attack. This also made her have to look at the faintly mysterious teenager in front of her. Yu Taifeng was also a little surprised after reacting to the attack at the first time. Because he never thought that he would encounter Mao Yhwach in this situation. At this moment, all kinds of information about Mao Yhwach also came to Yu Taifeng's mind. As the very popular Unohana in Shinigami's original novel, he was already the captain of the 4th Division of Gonei 13th Division when he appeared on the stage. In the original work, she always gives people a feeling of spring breeze, as if she is like the big sister next door. Coupled with the 4th Division under her leadership, she is in charge of medical affairs full-time, so she always feels not very powerful. However, Yu Taifeng was an anime fan before crossing, and he knew very well how terrifying Yhwach was. Before joining the Gonei 13th Division, Yhwach was one of the most wicked people in the entire Soul Society. She is not only ruthless, but also a paranoid fighting madman. Boasting to master all the genres and sword styles in the world, Mao Yhwach named herself Yakianryu. Later, she lost to each other in the battle with Yamamoto Genryūsai. After joining the original Gonei 13th Division, she successfully became the first-generation Kenpachi of the 11th Division and was renamed Unohana Retsu. As the first-generation Kenpachi, she learned Kaido from Kailan Temple Tenshiro. She thinks that in this way, she can enjoy the fun of fighting more. In the name of fighting against Rukongai's murderers, she went to Rukongai to find opponents and fighters that she liked. After accidentally encountering Zaraki Kenpachi in his youth, he was accidentally stabbed in the bones of Hungary. Because Zaraki Kenpachi sealed his power to the limit in pursuit of the fun of fighting, he was defeated by Unohana Retsu. In this battle, Unohana Retsu was stabbed below the throat and above the Hungarian bone. When she became the captain of the 4th Division, she covered her previous scars with braided braids, and her personality seemed to become gentler. In Shinigami's final 1,000-year bloody battle, in order to inspire Zaraki Kenpachi's abilities, and on the grounds that two Kenpachi could not appear in the same era, Unohana deliberately let the other party stab her own scar and died. Read more at mtlarchive.com. Yu Taifeng looked at Mao Yhwach not far away, and scanned the data in his memory one by one. Based on these data, he can undoubtedly draw a conclusion. That is, Unohana is definitely one of the top combat powers in the Shinigami world. However, according to the current timeline, Yhwach isn't too threatening. Just as Yu Taifeng was comparing her strengths in her heart, she saw Yhwach had already started to move preemptively. Come on for a pleasant battle. Wozohana yelled, and took the lead to kill. Although Yu Taifeng's previously envisioned plan was broken by Yhwach, he couldn't help but become more serious in the face of a strong opponent. After a few rounds of tentative moves, Yhwach is like a fighter machine without any emotions, becoming more and more excited. A burst of crisp weapon collisions echoed in the sky above this area. Obviously, Unohana is already in a state. Not only did she release all Ryatsu with all her strength, she also waved her saber again and again, attacking Yu Taifeng from various tricky angles. Yu Taifeng, who was attacked, turned on the Omniscience and Omnipotence, and at the same time he used his sword to defuse the opponent's offensive again and again. The collision between the weapon and Ryatsu brought up a cloud of dust, and the onlookers who had just started watching the excitement had to scatter and hide. After all, no one wants to be the dead soul in the aftermath of this war. Time and time again, Unohana poured all of Ryatsu into the sword in her hand, changing the way she attacked from time to time. or chop, or pick, or stab. On the surface, the seemingly calm flower of Mao Yhwach has already set off a storm in his heart at this moment. She would never have thought that the seemingly weak young man in front of her could cleverly resolve her fierce offensive again and again. Thinking of this, Yhwach couldn't help but increase the strength in her hand a bit. However, when she gradually increased the ryatsu and strength that had been poured into the sword again and again, she was even more shocked. Because she has only discovered now that no matter what swordsmanship she uses, the opponent can easily resolve it. What made her even more unbearable was that the young man in front of her looked completely at ease, and she couldn't see the slightest panic and nervousness. The fierce Yhwach couldn't figure out how the other party did this. Even if he is said to be the extremely evil person, even when facing a powerful enemy, he will feel a sense of horror. The reason why she was able to exercise her swordsmanship skills and ryatsu to the present level also depends on temporary epiphanies in the fierce actual combat time and time again, and summing up after the battle. Of course, Yu Taifeng didn't know what Mao Yhwach felt in her heart, because as early as the beginning of the battle, he had turned on omniscience and omnipotence, and he had already seen through all the opponent's offensive. Yhwach's seemingly vicious sword skills are undoubtedly like a white mouse, testing his understanding of kendo to him. Every round of her offensive, every sword skill she uses, and even every sword swing. For Yu Taifeng, it is like an experience potion to increase his kendo experience. Yhwach continued his fierce offensive round after round, and Yu Taifeng was able to resolve it casually like this. But the area where they fought is not as simple as imagined. Due to the strong ryatsu released again and again, and the sword energy poured into the sword body, the surrounding buildings have been collapsed and damaged in varying degrees. The wooden house seemed to be paper paste, and under the impact of ryatsu and jianqi time after time, it had already turned into countless tattered wooden boards. The sandy ground has already raised countless dusts because of the fighting between the two. The area of several hundred meters centered on these two people is like being blown by a violent typhoon. At this moment, Yhwach, who was a fighting mad, couldn't help but began to gasp heavily. Because all the sword skills she learned and comprehended had already been used up in the battle just now. Yu Taifeng smiled and looked at Mao Yhwach not far away. He shook his head helplessly and chuckled, "Are you sure you want to fight?" Episode 6. The Direction of Swordsmanship Breakthrough. After hearing Yu Taifeng's words, Yhwach couldn't help but become more solemn. She couldn't figure out how the seemingly weak young man in front of her could be evenly matched with what she was inextricably matched. Yhwach was very clear in her heart how strong she was. As a fighting freak, she truly regarded the other party as a respectable opponent at this moment. "Girl Yhwach, I have a suggestion. I wonder if you are interested in listening?" Yu Taifeng still looks relaxed, looking at Yhwach with a smile and said. "Just say anything, don't delay my enjoyment of fighting." Yhwach quickly adjusted her mood and returned to her original cold appearance. Yu Taifeng put the saber in his hand into his waist and said, "Since we can't help each other, let's stop here for today. After all, we all need to continue to practice, so as to be qualified to be opponents of the other side. What do you think?" Although Yhwach still wants to continue the fight, after the inextricable battle just now, she also has a lot of enlightenment. Naturally, she also feels that Yu Taifeng's words are somewhat reasonable. "The next time I am looking for you, it will be when I really beat you." Yhwach looked at Yu Taifeng with a serious face, and turned around and left after leaving a word. Yu Taifeng shook his head helplessly, then turned and walked towards his residence. The first confrontation between the two came to an end like this, leaving only a messy battle scene. After Yu Taifeng returned to his residence, he began to think about the gains of the battle while summarizing the results. For this battle with Yhwach, he was very clear about his shortcomings. If it weren't for the all-knowing and omnipotent relationship, it was possible that he would be defeated by the opponent shortly after the battle. When Yu Taifeng first started fighting with Yhwach, he turned on omniscience and omnipotence. The reason why he did this is not just to see through the holes and trajectories in the opponent's sword skills to prevent himself from overturning. What's more important is to learn and research Yhwach's sword skills while fighting the opponent. Although the current Unohana is not strong enough, whether it is the future Unohana Yachiryu or Unohana Retsu, it means that she has a strong kendo talent and fighting skills. This is exactly what makes Yu Taifeng feel fortunate. After all, having such an opponent with infinite potential and a guinea pig can kill two birds with one stone. Although Yu Taifeng is not a good person, he is definitely not a bloodthirsty person. His current goal is very clear, and that is to use omniscience and omnipotence to learn the fighting skills and abilities of other powerhouses. The appearance of Yhwach undoubtedly saved him a lot of trouble, and he didn't want to fight and kill those slightly stronger stray souls every day. Not only is it difficult to improve his strength in that way, but it is purely a waste of his precious time. Read more at mtlarchive.com. Although Yu Taifeng's current strength is still very weak, he aspires to become the strongest in the world, and now he has a different state of mind. After recalling the process of the battle in his mind for a while, he began to use Omniscience and Omnipotence to analyze and compare the battle scenes in his mind. After about an hour, Yu Taifeng has thoroughly mastered the various skills learned during this battle. Now, he is about to begin his first sword skill development in a true sense. Before crossing, Yu Taifeng liked to watch some anime and novels very much. At that time, he had always dreamed that he could be like all kinds of protagonists, possessing the ability to understand the whole world. Among them, whether it is the internet novels of the Tian dynasty or the animation of the Neon Country, there are many protagonists who use swords. Of course, what impressed him the most was the sword repairmen who were able to fly with swords in the Tianqiao internet novels. However, after crossing into the Shinigami world, it is undoubtedly a fantasy to become a swordsman. After all, this is completely incomparable with the Shinigami world. According to Yu Taifeng's understanding, although the power system in Shinigami's world is a bit complicated, in the final analysis, it still uses Ryatsu to fight. Whether it is swordsmanship, white hits, shuanpa, kido, and other combat skills, they can actually be understood as skills. As for the omniscience and omnipotence, the power of a word, the power of Hogyoku and even the moonless power later used by Kurosaki Ichigo, they are just special skills that are more powerful or practical. However, in the Shinigami world, no matter what skill you use, you must refer to the user's Ryatsu level more or less, and use this to determine the power of the skill or its role. If you want to truly exert the maximum power of various skills, and even exceed the upper limit of the original skill's power, it can be solved not only by having a super Ryatsu. Therefore, using the least amount of Ryatsu to maximize the power of various skills, and even without the help of Ryatsu, using various skills is the ultimate goal Yu Taifeng is currently pursuing. Yu Taifeng, who has been in the world of Shinigami for more than 3 years, has obtained the maximum Ryatsu that can be obtained in the 1 year or so since acquiring the system. He also found a problem, that is, even if he kills more powerful Liuxuan, it is difficult to get anything useful from the dropped box. After inquiring about the system before, he knew that he could only kill opponents with the same or higher level of Ryatsu as his own. Only in the dropped box can loot of the corresponding level be picked up. Even if you kill enemies weaker than yourself, Ryatsu with a value of 1 will be forced to drop. But there is really no need to do that. Now only the strong can make Yu Taifeng interested. Yu Taifeng, who had already formulated a plan to improve his strength, after digesting the combat experience not long ago, picked up the saber on the side and walked to the backyard, and began to try again and again. I saw that he completely suppressed Ryatsu in his body, relying only on the power of the flesh, and wielding the sword in his hand tirelessly. Swish. 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 The iron sword that Yu Taifeng wields in his hand changes its trajectory back and forth according to a special rhythm. The sound of the collision between the blade and the steel continued to echo in the backyard. It seems that it is really difficult to cut steel with physical strength alone, but it should be possible. Continue. After thinking about it for a while, Yu Taifeng re-entered the state of selflessness just now. A week later, in the backyard of Yu Taifeng's residence, the clash of sword blades and steel continued. However, the iron block leaning on the rock pile is just a lot of shallow scratches. Yu Taifeng looked at the iron sword with countless gaps in his hand because of practicing sword skills, and couldn't help but fall into contemplation. At this moment, he suddenly thought of a theory in a certain anime he had watched. Everything has breath. Whether it's a living thing, such as a living thing, or a dead thing, such as steel or stone. As long as you can feel the breath of all things, find the flaw in it, and swing a sword by surprise, you can cut it off. The sword that cuts iron like mud may really exist, but if you can master the breathing laws of all things, then even a wooden sword can cut everything. Although Yu Taifeng still doesn't know whether this theory can be applied to the Shinigami world, at least it must be tried first. Thinking of this, Yu Taifeng couldn't help becoming excited. He directly turned on All-Knowing and Almighty, and began to stare at the iron block in front of him to observe carefully. Episode 7. Comprehend sword skills, the realm of cutting iron. After turning on All-Knowing Almighty, Yu Taifeng carefully observed the iron block not far away. At this time, he had slowly settled down, and with the help of Omniscience and Omnipotence, he began to feel the surrounding environment with his heart. At this time, Yu Taifeng may not have noticed that he has actually entered a state of almost selflessness. The breeze gently brushed his cheeks, and the noisy environment outside the backyard wall and Yu Taifeng, who had been silent in his sentiment, formed a clear response to this. Countless subtle souls are like air, flooding every corner. The mottled walls that have been in disrepair, the gravel ground where the dust has settled, the messy piles of rocks that have been baptized by the years. Yu Taifeng only felt that the place he had lived in for several years had become a little strange for the first time. This unprecedented feeling of enlightenment made him fall into it and couldn't extricate himself from it. Under the analysis of all-knowing and all-powerful, even a dusty grain of dust has become a little different at this moment. Yu Taifeng was so silent in the world of sentiment, slowly experiencing everything around him, and began to work hard to understand what their deepest essence is. At this moment, the iron sword he had been holding for a long time in his hand gave him a familiar but unfamiliar feeling. The surrounding Lingzi moved in a peculiar trajectory, and he seemed to feel the origin of the iron sword in his hand at this moment. The countless iron-attributed spirits and carbon-attributed spirits are arranged in an orderly manner, as if according to a certain formula. The spirits of these two attributes are different from the free spirits floating in the air, but more like they have been specially modified. Everything has an aura. It seems that everything in the Shinigami world is closely related to the souls of various attributes. Yu Taifeng secretly said in his heart. With the help of all-knowing Almighty, Yu Taifeng has thoroughly understood the origin of the iron sword in his hand. At this time, he found some details that were not easy to detect. The two spirit sons of the iron sword in his own hands unexpectedly began to undergo subtle changes all the time. Although this change will not have any impact on the iron sword itself, the two spirits are like warriors resisting foreign enemies. Is this subtle change? Read more at mtlarchive.com. The iron spirit and carbon spirit that make up the iron sword, in order to resist the devouring of the time spirit and the corrosive spirit, they have made a mechanism similar to self-protection. So it is. After a period of hard thinking and meditation, Yu Taifeng finally saw the origin of the iron sword. At this moment, Rauscher's Shinching was already very calm, and he couldn't help but become agitated. I get it. Yu Taifeng exclaimed happily. Suddenly, Yu Taifeng, who was enlightened, directly grasped the handmade iron sword and came to the front of the iron block, beside the stone pile. Without any hesitation, he directly swung the iron sword in his hand and slashed at the iron block leaning on the rock pile. Crack. The original seemingly heavy piece of iron was directly split into two pieces by the iron sword in the sound of a metal collision. Upon seeing this scene, Yu Taifeng swung his sword again with joy. Amidst the clank of metal, the iron pieces that had just been cut into two pieces by the iron sword were directly broken down into dozens of pieces of different sizes at this moment. It's done. Yu Taifeng looked at the scattered iron pieces and pieces on the ground, finally showing a satisfied smile. Feel the breath of all things, that's what I meant. Everything is alive. Every substance in the Shinigami world is composed of spirits with different attributes. Spirits of various attributes, arranged according to the corresponding combination, will eventually be formed into some nihilistic or materialized matter. Any substance or thing is inherently resistant to those who try to obliterate them. Regardless of whether it is an iron sword or an iron block, although the spirits that belong to the structure are not the same, the spirits that make up them all have the same goal. The reason why Yu Taifeng was able to cut the iron piece smoothly was only based on the analysis of all-knowing and omnipotent and found the spirit of the iron piece to resist. Because as long as it is iron, it will rust. Yu Taifeng's current strength, although still not enough to master the power of controlling the time spirit. However, as long as he can use the carrier to induce a part of the time spirit and the power to corrupt the spirit. With the help of the two original spirits in the iron block, resist time and corrode the voids of the spirits. Surprisingly attacked its deficiencies, and directly attacked the flaws in the inner spirit of the iron block. And cut it off as soon as you find the flaw, it's not too simple. In order to confirm his conjecture, Yu Taifeng went directly to the big tree in the backyard, broke off a branch at random and held it in his left hand. Swish. Yu Taifeng slammed a branch with his left hand and hit the iron sword in his right hand directly. Crack. After a crisp sound, the iron sword struck by the tree branch broke into two pieces. If anyone sees this amazing scene, he will definitely exclaim. Because this kind of thing has exceeded the public's cognition. At this moment, Yu Taifeng can even affirm that he has embarked on a path that has never been seen before. He had fully understood the realm of iron slashing, and now he also needed to start striding towards a new goal. But before that, Yu Taifeng had to go to the weapon shop first. Because his saber has been completely scrapped due to the development of sword skills this time, it is time to find a new saber for himself. Episode 8. True and False Sealed State. Yu Taifeng, who mastered the realm of slashing iron, was in a good mood. He didn't have too much delay along the way and went straight to the largest black market in Zaraki district. Come here, take a look. The newly arrived Ryatsu secret technique is cheap. The White Hits performance has started, and everyone who likes it will come to join us. Imitation Sealed State is on sale at a low price. Each one is a must-have product for home travel and self-defense. The smuggled gunpowder is cheap to deal with, and there are even more dangerous and amazing finished fire mines. Let's take a look. Yu Taifeng, who has been here many times, couldn't help but fall into contemplation as he watched the merchants yelling at the stalls on both sides of the road. Because the things sold on this black market are not only diverse, but these merchants even dared to sell them loudly, completely undaunted. After thinking for a while, Yu Taifeng was also relieved. Although in his opinion, the power of these merchants can only be regarded as a strong wandering soul at best. However, since they can get those messy things, they must also have their own unknown channels. After all, no one can guarantee what kind of power is behind which businessman. Therefore, this black market is not only extremely lively, but also has the shadow of various forces in Genryūsai. While walking through the black market casually, Yu Taifeng focused all his attention on the various merchants selling weapons. At this time, a young man with black curly hair caught his attention. Yo, sealed state, sealed state. The real sealed state. The black curly-haired man put on a cynical look, looking at the businessmen around him, yelling in a learned manner. But from his appearance, it is obvious that he is not a vendor who often comes to this black market. After hearing the curly-haired man screaming, various passers-by would stay in front of his stall for a few seconds, and then turned away with disdain. Hey. I am really sealed state. What kind of expression do you guys look like? Hey. Although the curly-haired man was trying his best to sell, but when he saw that there were more or less potential buyers gathered in front of the stalls around him, the whole person became a little anxious. Not far away, a boss selling weapons, after taking a look at the curly-haired man who was still yelling, he said loudly to the buyer in front of his booth with a look of disdain, "I don't know how high the earth is. I dare to say that he sells genuine goods at a fair price." Sealed state. I have lived in Zaraki district for more than 30 years, and this is the first time I have seen such a big talker. Right. Looking at that guy's unreliable look, he looks like a liar. Let him shout, the louder he shouts, the faster he will suffer. Those Shinigami in Genryūsai are not vegetarian. After he was caught by those Shinigami for questioning, he would understand what misfortune came out of his mouth. Ha. All kinds of passers-by spoke loudly to mock the curly-haired man, and some even laughed loudly with an attitude of watching the excitement. Read more at mtlarchive.com. Just as a group of passers-by talked about each other, Yu Taifeng stepped towards the direction of the curly-haired man. After seeing Yu Taifeng, the crowd of onlookers who were shouting loudly showed shocked expressions, then quickly closed their eyes and dispersed. Go. Don't touch that murderous mold. Brother, stay away with me. That curly boss is going to be unlucky now. Yu Taifeng saw the performance of passers-by. Although he felt helpless, there was no way. After all, in the more than a year since acquiring the system, he has indeed solved hundreds of murderers with his own hands. At first, some small organizations dared to challenge him. But with the passage of time, more and more murderers died in his hands. In Zaraki district and several nearby districts, there is also a legend of young killer god. Oh hello. Don't go. I am a sealed state. If you don't believe me, try it. The curly-haired man looked at the onlookers who had left with a dazed expression, and reluctantly opened his mouth to stay. However, he found that no matter how he recruited customers, no one dared to approach here. At this moment, he curled his lips helplessly, and squatted directly on the ground to meditate. Boss, can you let me see this sealed state? The curly-haired man who was thinking about life with his head down, after hearing this voice, he curiously raised his head and looked at it. I saw a young man squatting in front of his stall, looking curiously. Besides Yu Taifeng, who else can come here? At this moment, he was squatting on the ground and looking at the sealed state on the floor with concentrated eyes. The curly-haired man hurriedly sorted out his expressions and introduced happily. Little brother. Are you interested in a genuine sealed state? Can you let me see the sealed state? Yu Taifeng didn't answer the other party's question directly, but asked calmly. Yes. Look at it. These are real treasures. The curly-haired man quickly introduced it as he saw a customer. Yu Taifeng picked up one of the sealed state and then directly observed it with omniscience and omnipotence. At this time, while using omniscience and omnipotence for analysis, he used the breathing of all things method that he had just realized not long ago. The curly-haired man looked at the seemingly pretending young man before him and asked somewhat proudly, how about? Little brother? My babes are good, aren't they? A few minutes later, Yu Taifeng directly raised his head and said casually, I want this sealed state. Let's make a price. The curly-haired man would never have thought that the other party would be so simple. He asked in a tentative tone, "Little brother, are you sure you want the sealed state? Are you not afraid that this is an imitation? You only need to make a price. As for whether it is a fake or not, I have my own judgment." Yu Taifeng replied simply. When the curly-haired man heard his words, a playful expression flashed across his face, but he quickly returned to his carefree appearance. At this time, he felt like he was different from just now. He looked at Yu Taifeng with a smile, and said, "Since you really want it, then come up with something that will satisfy me in exchange, otherwise." "Something that satisfies you?" After hearing the strange condition of the curly-haired man, Yu Taifeng did not show any surprise. Now he has begun to think about what should be exchanged with the other party. After a quick thought, Yu Taifeng put down the sealed state in his hand, turned around, and left. Hey, don't go." The curly-haired man would never have imagined that a teenager who had just been interested in the things he was selling would suddenly leave. This Rukongai doesn't seem to be as fun as in the legend. The curly-haired man shook his head helplessly, as if he had made some decision, and slowly began to tidy up. Just as he was about to pack up the goods, Yu Taifeng, who had just left, appeared in front of him again. Episode 9. Branches and the God of Swords. The curly-haired man who was about to settle and leave, couldn't help showing a surprised expression after seeing Yu Taifeng reappearing. But the astonishment on his face flashed in an instant, replaced by a look of curiosity. Because of the re-emergence of Yu Taifeng, a brand new iron sword and a branch were pinned to his waist. This? The curly-haired man was a little puzzled, looking at Yu Taifeng, who was walking towards him again, wondering what kind of medicine was sold in the other's gourd. "Little brother, what are you doing? It seems that you have bought what you want from others, right?" The curly-haired man was also very straightforward, and directly said what he wanted in his heart. "I'm here to get the sealed state just now," Yu Taifeng said calmly. After hearing Yu Taifeng's words, the curly-haired man looked at him up and down again, then chuckled and said, "You don't want to use the scrap iron pinned to your waist to exchange it with me, do you?" "No. Little brother, I'm very busy. I don't have time to play games with you here." The curly-haired man shook his head helplessly, and continued to tidy up. "I used this branch in exchange for you." When the curly-haired man heard Yu Taifeng's words, his face blushed and white, and then he directly supported his forehead with his right hand. "Little brother, stop teasing. Do you really take me as a fool?" Yu Taifeng was not angry because of the other party's words. He directly drew out the iron sword on his waist with his left hand, and swung the branch in his right hand to the iron sword in his left hand. Crack. A crisp sound was heard from the sword, and then the iron sword in Yu Taifeng's hand was directly broken in two. "Hi." After seeing this scene, the curly-haired man couldn't help taking a breath. At this moment, he looked at the broken sword that fell on the ground with an incredible look. "This is impossible." While talking to himself, the curly-haired man stepped up to Yu Taifeng. He squatted down quickly and picked up the broken sword, looking at it with a puzzled look. After half a minute, the curly-haired man repeatedly confirmed that the broken sword in his hand was a genuine thing, and the expression on his face was not to mention how wonderful. "Is it all right now?" Yu Taifeng looked at the curly-haired man with a smile and said. "The Spirit King is here. What kind of strange thing is this branch? You can just take it back and study it slowly?" Yu Taifeng reminded. Yes. I want to go back and study it slowly." "Correct. This is the sealed state you want. Brother, you can't go back. This branch is now mine. Read more at mtlarchive.com. The curly-haired man hurriedly pulled out a sealed state from the parcel on the ground, and snatched the branch from Yu Taifeng's hands. After completing this series of actions, he directly turned around and appeared 10 meters away instantly. And with a terrifying speed, quickly disappeared into Yu Taifeng's sight. The scene that took place here was seen by onlookers not far away. The branches in Yu Taifeng's hands had already stunned them. But now, when they saw the careless curly-haired man who was able to move instantaneously, they began to wonder if they were dazzled. Shun. Shuanpa. It's Shuanpa. My God, a middle-aged man who was dressed a little bit higher exclaimed. Shuanpa? What is Shuanpa? A vendor who was also an onlooker asked with a dazed expression. Shuanpa. That can only be done by advanced Shinigami. My God. The middle-aged man looked at the direction the curly-haired man was leaving, feeling scared for a while. When the onlookers heard the word Shinigami, they all showed unbelievable expressions. The middle-aged man who had just been popularizing science for many onlookers, thought of the scene just now, and at this time, he was also afraid. Because his younger brother is also a Shinigami. He can live a good life by selling some items that flow out of Siriidii as he is now. The most important reason for this is his brother's help behind the scenes. He knows better than anyone else in his heart what Shinigami means to ordinary wandering souls living on Rakongai. Although his younger brother is only a Shinigami of the lowest level, it also makes him rise in the Rakongai of life. I will visit my younger brother every other time, and I will always tell him about various things in Seriidii. It was not long ago that he heard about Shinigami-related things like Zanshu and Gogi. The stronger Shinigami, the farther you can use Shuinpa. At this moment, the middle-aged man's mind kept echoing his brother's words. After being overwhelmed for a while, the middle-aged man has no more leisure time to stay in the black market. Because as one of the onlookers, he made some cynicism just now. He hurriedly left this place of right and wrong, for fear that the man with curly hair just appeared again. Wrong. It should be said that it is curly hair Shinigami. Yu Taifeng looked at the sealed state that had been strongly bought and sold, with a smug smile on his face. After pinning the sealed state to his waist, he quickly turned and left the black market. After all, the branch that was taken away by the other party just now only saw ordinary branches. As for the sealed state I got, it is a real sealed state. Because Yu Taifeng never thought that he would meet acquaintances here. He quickly turned around and walked towards his residence, while beginning to recall the message of the curly-haired man. The curly-haired man who just bartered with himself is not a small person. Because he is the famous sword god in the Shinigami world Nemea Wanyue. Yu Taifeng, who is very familiar with Shinigami's original work, has a lot of knowledge about this sword god. Who is Ermiwa Wanyue? He is the inventor of Zanpakuto, and he is also a low-key strong man. The mysterious Wanyu is not just as simple as it seems on the surface. He is not only one of the 5 captains of the Zero Division, but also the creator of all sealed states. You know, if you want to become the captain of the Zero Division, you need to contribute to the history of Soul Society. Nemea Wanyue is called the God of Swords, precisely because he invented Zanpakuto. Zanpakuto, as the most important battle item of the Shinigami power system in the Shinigami world, is as important as you can imagine. In Shinigami's original Millennium Blood War episode, Nagaya Wanyu is the God of Swordsmen. Not only helped Kurosaki Ichigo and Abaririnji to reforge Zanpakuto, but in the final battle of the Spirit Palace, they killed 4 members of the Star Cross Knights with 1 enemy and 4. Yu Taifeng can even be sure that if there is no Nemea Wanyue, then there will be no Shinigami. Since the last time I met Mao Yhwach, Yu Taifeng sighed in his heart. This time, he never dreamed that he not only met Ermiwa Wanyue, but also sturdily pitted him. Thinking of this, Yu Taifeng, who has a calm personality, almost laughed out of a pig cry. I don't know what kind of expression will Tang Tang Sword God look like after discovering that the cut branches are just ordinary branches? Yu Taifeng thought to himself. Episode 10. The Essence of Sealed State and the Daunting God of Swords. Because of his own round of saw operations, Yu Taifeng, who took a big advantage, is in a good mood at the moment. After returning to his residence, he was already a little impatient. Now that we have got our own sealed state, now it has become the most important thing to study sealed state with the convenience of omniscience and omnipotence. Yu Taifeng sat cross-legged casually on the ground, placed the sealed state on his lap and began to study. After turning on the omniscience and omnipotence, he felt the fluctuations of the spirits around him while stroking the blade of the sealed state with his hand. After a while, Yu Taifeng entered a state of sentiment. Under the analysis of omniscience and omnipotence, the spiritual composition of the sealed state was also presented before his eyes. The more in depth Yu Taifeng analyzed and understood, the more surprised he was. Because at this time, he has thoroughly seen the origin of the sealed state. I saw in the slender sword body, this sealed state contained countless frightening powers. Yu Taifeng tried to mobilize the souls around him to resonate with the sealed state, but after several attempts, he finally gave up. Because he discovered an extremely important problem, that is, the Reiatsu in his body is not enough to resonate with the sealed state in his hand. In other words, he can't do Shirkai at this moment. However, this initial attempt was not without any gains. At the very least, Yu Taifeng can draw 2 conclusions with great certainty. With the help of omniscience and omnipotence, he has discovered that the essence of the sealed state spirit child turned out to be evolution. Although the sealed state is only the prototype of Zanpakuto, their final form must be Zanpakuto, with different attributes. Whether it is better than Ryujin Jaka of Yamamoto Genryūsai, Kyokusu Ugetsu of Aizen, or Zangetsu of Kurosaki Ichigo. Each Zanpakuto's inner soul is developing in a different direction because of the owner's character and heart. It is no wonder that every Shinigami who can awaken the sealed state will have Zanpakuto with different attributes. If the Shinigami holding Zanpakuto are compared to the words of the Creator. So whether it's sealed state or Zanpakuto, they are both a world transformed by the creators with Reiatsu as the medium. As for what the creator likes, or what their original minds are like, this is unclear. 1,000 people have 1,000 faces. After the sealed state that was given its name became Zanpakuto, it was naturally not exactly the same as Shinigami's combat tool. Read more at mtlarchive.com. Blindly conducting research is indeed too restrictive. I still have to improve my Ryatsu level as soon as possible. Yu Taifeng said secretly in his heart. Relying on the law of all things breathing researched not long ago, Yu Taifeng also discovered one, which currently leaves him with some helpless conclusions. That is, although sealed state can have self-conscious breathing, he has not been able to discover the flaws in it at present. After a period of thinking and analysis, Yu Taifeng is not paranoid to draw any definite conclusions. Because he is also very clear in his heart that if he can see through the sealed state or Zanpakuto flaws, then directly cut off the opponent's Zanpakuto in the battle, how else can others play? At this moment, Yu Taifeng couldn't help but admire Ermea Wanyue as the sword god from the bottom of his heart. After all, every sealed state in Shinigami's world is forged by him. Although Yu Taifeng didn't know at this moment whether the sealed state created by Wanyue was his own work, or he relied on the help of some media. However, this is enough to make people respect. Even though Yu Taifeng has already looked away, it does not mean that he has no desire to pursue the ultimate. It seems that there will be a chance in the future, and you have to consult the sword god. Thinking about it now, he should have found himself fooled by me, right? As Yu Taifeng thought in his heart, he once again recalled the excitement of the sword god picking up the treasure not long ago. Thinking of this, he also smiled awkwardly. At this moment, in the Phoenix Palace in the Siriidii 0 Division resident, Ermea Wanyue, with curly hair, was looking at the broken branch in his hand with a dazed expression. How can this be? Now he has a feeling of crying without tears. Because he found that he was actually pitted. Don't let those 4 guys know about this. Otherwise, as the dignified sword god, I will definitely be laughed at by them. Wanyue said inwardly. It shouldn't be. How did that brat do it? I cut off the iron sword with a branch. If I say it, no one will believe it, right? The problem is, I checked the truncated iron sword. Although an iron sword of that level is just dull scrap iron, it is also an iron sword anyway. Even the sharp branches, it is impossible to cut the steel. His Ryatsu level is at best the most ordinary Shinigami player. How can it be done easily? How about cutting off the iron sword with a branch? And when he was swinging the sword, I didn't feel Ryatsu's leak. Then how terrifying is his physical power? Even Yamamoto guy, I am afraid it is difficult to use pure power? Ermea Wanyue couldn't help but fall into deep contemplation at this time. The boy not long ago was like a mystery now, so he couldn't understand it. He now has a very strong instinct. That was the seemingly harmless young man, and he probably mastered something amazing. You must find a way to find him, and ask carefully. Wanyue said to himself. After studying the sealed state just obtained, Yu Taifeng began to realize the method of breathing of all things in the backyard. Just as he was silent in his sentiment, a clear and sweet voice came into his ears from outside the wall of the backyard.